Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I am your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I am really excited to be talking with Lindsay Jacaman. Lindsay is one of the event chairs for an upcoming event for an organization called The Family Place. The event that they're doing is the 2023 Texas Trailblazer Awards. And this is actually a little different than a lot of the other events that we do in that it's a luncheon and that it's held in the daytime. So, one of the things we'll be talking a little bit about with Lindsay today is the difference between that and utilizing and doing an event in the evening. So with that, Lindsay, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here.
Awesome. So if you wouldn't mind, would you be able to just, give us a little bit of information about what the mission of the Family Place is and what you all do?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Rob, thanks again for having me. I'm excited. And I will tell you a little bit about the Family Place. I don't know if you know this, but 1 in 3 Texans will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. And that's one of the highest rates in the entire country. And the Family Place is the largest provider of family violence services in Texas, working to build brighter futures for all survivors. In fact, in 2022, we provided services to almost 20,000 people and their pets too.
Oh, and their pets. So it's when it's
Yeah.
the family, I mean, it is the whole family. So animals are welcome. And I know that I think that's a wonderful thing, that you all add to include though, because I know not necessarily every single domestic violence shelter organization is able to do that. So I think it's wonderful that you really do provide that, because especially for a lot of people who suffer trauma and abuse, having their pets around is really kind of one of the main, if not the main source of comfort that they have.
Exactly. And they don't want to leave their pets and they don't want to leave them in that situation. So we do have a whole really lovely shelter built out for them to keep dogs and cats comfortable while people are staying, on our properties.
Oh, that's great. Because, my burning question was, how do you account for folks that may have allergies? So the fact that they're on site, they may not necessarily be able to stay in their room for allergy reasons, but they are able to access them basically whenever they would like.
Yeah,
Oh, that,
exactly.
oh, that's really wonderful. That really warms my heart to hear about. So it's such a great organization. Tell me a little bit about how you initially got involved with this organization, the Family Place.
Sure. Yeah. So I moved to Dallas. The Wall Street Journal relocated me here in 2002. I left the journal and I actually became publisher of Modern Luxury Dallas magazine back in 2009. And during that time, I really got to be familiar with the mission of Family Place, with Paige Flink when she was CEO, and they asked me to co-chair Stiletto Strut with Jen Strauss and Stacy Gerard, now Stacy Rosansky, back in 2012. So that's when we got everyone in Dallas to wear high heels and walk around downtown Neiman's, and had an event that benefited the Family Place, but also celebrated high heels. And then fast forward, I joined the board of directors in late 2018, and this is actually my 5th full year on the board.
Wow, that's great. So, one question I have for you is, what is the reason? Because, it's some people will cycle on and off boards after their 2-year stint. You've been involved with this organization really actively for a decade plus. What about the Family Place has you keep coming back, that you continually stay involved, for a really long period of time?
Yeah. So the way I look at, I think it's twofold. And that's a great question. Thank you. One is that you can serve on the board in 2 subsequent 3-year terms. So I'll be fulfilling those 2 terms, and then I'll either roll to the foundation board or roll off. But personally, I do have a connection to this cause. I was in an abusive relationship. And there was a lot of shame and stigma attached to it at the time. And I could have easily gone down the path and married my abuser and had a whole lifetime of that, but I didn't. I left. And so I find it very rewarding to help women, especially women in that situation, see that there's light and hope on the other side of that. And I just will also say that family violence knows no socioeconomic boundaries. I mean, it happens to everyone, your neighbors, 1 in 3, 1 in 3, and not just women.
Oh yeah.
So it's really so very prevalent, and that's really what keeps me tied and so passionate about what we do.
I'm glad that you brought up, and thank you so much for sharing, your personal connection and personal tie. And, one of the things we talk about often on this show is, for people to want to give to an organization, there has to be a certain personal tie to the organization. Now, I'd like to ask you, if I may, what is the most rewarding thing for you in terms of paying it forward? Because really what I see you doing is you were in a situation that was really bad and really horrible, and you were able to get out of it. And what I really admire about you is that you do pay it forward, and because you understand how those people feel, and you want to make sure that nobody else feels that way. So would you mind sharing a little bit more, about, your desire to pay it forward and what motivates you to do that?
Sure. You know, I think it's a gift to be able to give back in this way. It's a gift to be able to really have a positive impact on the community. And I've been involved in different nonprofits throughout Dallas in my 20 years here, and like being so involved is just such a part and a facet of the fabric of our community. I can't imagine not being involved. And specifically with the family place, knowing that when I communicate out to my networks and really raise the awareness for this mission, for our events, and drive those dollars into the doors, that we're going to make a positive, long-lasting impact on the lives of people who need our help the most, people who are suffering, people who are afraid, people who have children who are afraid, who are hiding in closets, who are fighting for their lives every single day, because they're afraid of people that are supposed to love them and trust them, and they're doing the wrong thing. And women die, especially women die of family violence every single day and month in our city. And so being able to help influence this on so many different fronts, because the work that the family place does is so multifaceted, it's really a gift.
So what are some of the, let's talk, before we talk about the event, talk a little bit about some of those specific services that the family place offers to really allow not just individuals, but also families, because a lot of folks that you all take in, I know, also have children in addition to pets.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about some of the services that you offer, but allow people to really allow them to get back off onto their feet and maybe, become a little bit less afraid.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for that question. So, we have a hotline that's 24/7, that's manned, but with people who are trained for those types of conversations that are coming in of people in crisis. Last year we provided over 64,000 shelter days. So we have various properties that where we house people and make them feel comfortable and warm, and so that they can really focus on, starting their lives over. We have transitional housing days. In fact, I think last year we provided 24,000 transitional housing days. Counseling hours up to, I think, was almost 20,000 counseling hours last year. Crisis and case management sessions. So, providing people also too with like short-term financial assistance if they can't pay, a utility bill, for example, or a credit card bill. We do have funds that are we can be used for those types of things. And then group sessions for batterers. So we focus on the victim, of course, but we also want to provide, rehabilitative counseling for abusers themselves. And there's a lot of work too that we're doing above and beyond on the public policy front. So in terms of lobbying, in terms of working with the other interdisciplinary partners like the Dallas Police Department and so many others throughout the community. And that's just scratching the surface of what we do.
Well, I love that. And, one of the things that, and especially, and I know you have a business background working at, first for the Wall Street Journal, and then also working with LinkedIn currently, that, I really like that, how nonprofits and people with a business mindset don't always necessarily understand that, but nonprofits are not competition, and nonprofits work with other nonprofits, they work with other organizations, they become more successful when they build in and they network. So I really thank you for stating and sharing sharing how important it is to deal with organizations like the police department, and then as well as some other crisis services that allow people to get back on their feet.
Yeah, and a lot of the issues too that stem from domestic violence are interrelated with others. So, I've also been involved in charities that are focused on, abused children, for example. And abuse is not just doesn't just usually stop with the parent. It definitely, it affects others in the family. So a lot of it's interconnected.
Oh, it totally is. And, the needs for, what you serve as the whole family, but children may have a specific need, and partnering, with a children's nonprofit can give them the additional services that complement what the family place offers.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. It's really a wonderful organization. The fact that it's the largest one in Texas, I wish we didn't have to have organizations like the family place, but it's great to see that you all help so many. And one of the things we're here to talk about today is your upcoming signature fundraiser to raise funds to really allow you all to continue that mission. So the one thing, and we've only had a couple of luncheons so far to date as guests on the show. So would you be able to talk a little bit about the difference between having an event that's during the day as well versus having an event that's in the evening, and kind of how putting that together is a little bit different?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think there's a lot of similarities, but from a differences, and I can talk about those here separately, but in terms of the differences, you're really thinking about creating a whole experience, from a 360 standpoint, from when people, first get that first piece of direct mail, or, see it come up on their social channels, to when they leave and they're at valet. You have to think about the experience and want to make sure that, because it is during the day, that it's efficient. People want to get in and get out in a certain amount of time. Generally, we don't necessarily serve alcohol, or we might have a bottle of white wine on the table, but it's not readily available. It's not the focus of the evening. There's no cocktail hour. And you have to think about, okay, how do we maximize our ability to raise funds? But we don't have as much time, and we may not have an auction, for example. We may not have the ability to do a call for cash. Although for Trailblazers, we are going to do a call for cash. But you have to really think about the programming and the flow of the event. And then, of course, our keynote, our guest speaker, if you will, what does that look like? What are we, providing from a value standpoint, from an entertainment angle for those who are attending? And so we thought a lot about that. And also for Trailblazers, it's really centered around an award, and we want to recognize people who have made an impact in the community and celebrate their work, and the influence that they've had on the cause, on raising awareness for the issue, and just the community at large.
So, talk a little bit about, if you may, what the process is in selecting a recipient of that award each year, and kind of what the organization and what the event committee looks for when they select an honoree.
It's a really good question. I will say that I'm so fortunate, Holly and I are so fortunate to work with the staff at the Family Place. They are truly excellent stewards of the mission. And I know that they have spent a lot of time and effort and energy really thinking about the most deserving recipients. I can't share who is on the short list for this year, but I will say that they have impacted legislation that will have a huge, huge influence on our community for the good. And they were really champions and very stalwart in their support of a bill that will have, again, really, really important impact to survivors, but also potential victims. So, but I know so much goes into that, and thinking about the past year, and really like who was at the front lines, who made who stood out from an impact standpoint is what they look at. But there's so many different factors, and Holly and I are just able to think about, when they've got a short list, to say, to provide our 2 cents, if you will, just to make sure that we're on board and aligned with the decisions.
That's great that the organization, to me, any successful gala that I've ever been to, the chairs and the organization are simpatico. So I really appreciate you saying that, it's not you and Holly Krug, who is your co-chair, walk in and say, we want to honor this person. And it's not the organization telling you this person has to be honored. It really is a process, and it's a collaboration between multiple sides, because for any fundraiser to work, you have to have engaged chairs, you also have to have an engaged board, and you also have to have a nonprofit that has a good relationship with both. And that's one of the things about Family Place that's been so amazing over the years that I've seen that journey, covering many of the events that you all have covered, is how well you do all work together, and that there are folks like you or folks like Joyce Goss who are involved with it year after year for years, if not decades.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the trifecta, I think.
Uh,
Just a fabulous staff and CEO, and then the board, the support of the board, which we absolutely have. And then also, Holly and I are really engaged, and we love representing the Family Place, and we'll do anything we can to make this event successful.
Oh, that's fantastic. And is there a piece of advice you might want to give to someone who has a nonprofit where maybe all three, you don't have the trifecta? What's a first step that an organization or a board chair or an event chair can take to really help facilitate that great trust triangle, we'll call it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, and I use this in my own career and professional life as well, but it's about being willing to be pleased. Walking into the situation, knowing you're open-minded. You want to work well with the staff, and also it's about really thinking through your own capacity and ability to fulfill your commitment, and knowing really what's involved. And being involved in putting together a big event like this. It takes months and sometimes a year, which Holly and I have been planning for over a year. It takes hours. It's a marathon. It's every week we have calls, and right before I went for a family vacation, I signed 1,500 letters in 2 days.
That's a commitment.
Yeah, exactly. So really it's examining your own capacity and being honest and realistic in what you can give, and being upfront as you take on that commitment, or you don't. You say, what, I'd love to do this, but this isn't my year. Plan a couple of years in advance. I already am thinking about what the next frontier is from an event leadership standpoint. I think it's really being really honest with yourself and with the organization.
That's great. And I really like that you mentioned in one of the things you said that just because you say no, not right now, it may be good for next year, and that you're always thinking about how can I help and make the most impact? And I think sometimes where some people struggle with nonprofits is they feel that they have to do everything immediately at one time, and then they get overwhelmed and they get burned out. And
Yeah.
you can tell that you think very thoughtfully of, I can contribute this now, and then next year I can contribute this, and 2 years from now I can contribute that. And it allows it to be a marathon as opposed to a 100-yard dash, because if you run lots of 100-yard dashes in a day or in a row, you're going to get tired out. Whereas a marathon, you've got to pace yourself. So I think that's some really sage advice.
Thank you. Yeah. And as a working mom, I have no other choice.
I totally get and understand that. So,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about, because the Family Place really does have such a devoted following, and you all really do have great signature events, that go to many different tentacles of the community. And I think the Family Place is probably one of the best organizations in Texas to do that. With your event, I know it is one of the, if not the most popular luncheon in Dallas each year. What do you think the secret is to creating such a devoted following that has people that want to come back year after year after year?
That's a good question. I think it's a matter of, I think it's multifaceted. I think that it is the mission, just the pervasive nature of domestic abuse, and the awareness in the community for the issue. That's first and foremost. I think it's about just communication and cultivation of that donor database and all of those tentacles, like you mentioned, over time. Just, decades of being in the community, being consistent voice for the issue, and being very visible. I think from a, communications and public relations standpoint, making like a huge effort to be there top of mind when, things happen in our society at large, not just here in Dallas, but of course also here in Dallas. To be that voice for the issue, and then just surprising and delighting people when they attend our events. and making them feel good when they leave, knowing that they did make, an impact, even if they gave $100 or came as someone's guest, but now they can talk about the event and spread the word for what we do with their own personal networks. I mean, you can really make an impact in so many ways, not only just by, charging your credit card with a donation. There's just so many ways to get involved. But I think we've just done that really, really well year after year after year.
That's really great. And it's like you said, really the metaphor, I think, for this episode is really it's a marathon, and it's just making sure that you're continually doing the work and that it's not these bursts that you have to do everything at once. It's sometimes good to roll things out over time because it allows you to maintain a top of mindness as opposed to rolling everything out in a perfect package, in the beginning. And you mentioned something in your response about networking. And, I wanted to talk about that and about you personally, because you're a busy professional. You've got a lot going on. You're a mom as well, and you're also actively involved in your community. How do you think being involved and giving back helps a person's career from a networking perspective?
In so many ways, and tangible and intangible. I think, and I thought about this early on, it's just a matter of like I said, like being open-minded, and you're going to get out of something what you put into it. So I make a concerted effort when I join a board or I start engaging with an organization to make sure I connect with them, like on platform LinkedIn, for example. Just to make sure I'm connected, understand, what their career and what their background is, maybe people that we know in common, and kind of tuck that into the back of my mind. But I do this with a rigor, so I truly know like all of my colleagues on the board, for example. And then I really listen. I attend board meetings in person. I listen to what people have to say. I network and I engage during those events that we have for board meetings. And it just helps broaden my horizons in terms of who I know in the community, who I might tap for something in the future. Knowing that, a colleague, Tom McCullum on the board, for example, owns an Audi dealership. I've got a friend looking for an Audi. Just connecting people in an organic way knits you closer together and knits you deeper into that community. And I think helps you get the most out of, being involved. And I'm just really, I think I'm very disciplined from a networking standpoint. And it just has always benefited me in just so many ways.
That's awesome. And what I love, especially with the example with the Audi dealership, I love because to me, a good networker is a good dot connector. And that really is what separates an adequate networker from, a really good one. One thing I was hoping that maybe you could elaborate a little bit on is what's a piece of advice you would give to somebody who maybe is afraid to join a nonprofit or afraid to join their first committee or afraid to join their first board to get them over that hump to really realize they can really make a positive impact in their community?
Yeah, I really encourage, first-time potential board of director members to meet with the CEO of the organization, to have an honest conversation, understand their vision, and how does that sit with you? Does it sound, what is being a board member, really, really, what is it like? Also talk to current board members, talk about, how do you give back? What's your role on the board? How have you been involved in committees? What type of time commitment is it? What do you get out of it? Have you met wonderful people through it? I mean, just asking questions, being engaged. I think understanding that the leadership's point of view on really what, those responsibilities of the board member, and then really being honest with yourself on where you can contribute. Because like I said, it may not be the right time now, but you're attracted to the cause and down the road you want to get involved. I think it's fine to say that. I've graciously declined invitations to join boards, but said, tap me in 2 years. I think so. I think it's just, again, I think it's having that dialogue, being open and being honest.
Well, I love that how you say no doesn't mean no forever. No means no, not right now, because, really what you're saying in a really nice way is I only want to be involved with your organization if I can give 150%. And I think that's really important, for people to realize, that time is finite and you want to make sure that you're maximizing, the maximum amount of time, while you're here. And, I wanted to go back a little bit to the event, and, you all have a really amazing, awesome special guest this year in, someone who's really, it's a cultural icon in Brooke Shields. tell us a little bit about, how the organization goes about selecting a particular person to headline, an event. And with a luncheon, I have always found that the luncheons that do the best usually will have some type of substantive draw. I've actually been to a luncheon in Austin where Brooke Shields was actually a guest. So, and it was a draw, and it was a really big year for the organization. So can you elaborate a little bit on kind of what the process is of how an organization picks the right guest for the right time?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I think there's 3 or 4 key things. One is that we worked with the Speakers Bureau because they do have access to, to people, celebrities, if you will, or notable guests, potential guests. I think it's people and celebrities since COVID are less inclined, less interested in speaking, like, in events like ours. So that is something that's why, having that speaker, that agent that can go and speak to them on your behalf is really important. So that's step and key number one. The second is start planning early. I mean, since day one, even I think a year or possibly more out, Holly and I were thinking and working with the Family Place and their incredible development team about, who we want, what the message is that we want to have people walk away with. So that's number 2, start planning early. 3 is making sure that you have a P&L for the event that can support the investment of a noteworthy speaker guest. And then lastly, and this is so important, and Holly and I, it was a little nerve-wracking, but I'm really glad that we didn't settle. We had the opportunity to choose someone that would be, I think that would be very good, but not necessarily a draw, not necessarily a big name, or not necessarily really turn heads when we talk about the event. And we know that Brooke Shields will. So it's those 4 things, I think. Work with the Speakers Bureau, plan early, make sure your P&L can support it, and don't settle.
Well, and that's the part that I think is really important. I think the 4th one's really important, but I think the 3rd one is just as important, because it really is about a return on investment. Mm-hmm. Is spending the money to have Brooke Shields as a guest, is it going to facilitate either more sponsorships or more ticket sales? And someone like her, the answer is almost invariably going to be yes. And you're going to get your return on your investment, your investment out of that. So I think those are 4 really, really excellent points. And while we're on the subject of Brooke, what is a piece of advice you would give to an organization that has to engage with a celebrity or another high profile person at their event?
I think it starts with the mission, just to make sure that you have that personal connection to the mission, that you're passionate about it, so you can speak naturally, and you want to be able to have it sprinkle it into conversation with your friends and your professional colleagues, and you're with your network, and you want to do it organically. Understanding the capacity of the staff is really important. You're going to be working with people that have the time and the space to help you succeed, with the event. And then again, like I said, I think that's a theme, is understanding and being honest with your own capacity. And then sharing with a friend. It's been wonderful to chair an event with Holly. She was my first friend in Dallas. We've been friends for almost, I think, actually coming up on over 20 years, actually. And it's fun, and we divide and conquer a bit, and we have different networks, but there's a lot of ways in which we complement each other. And so that's been really rewarding. And I would highly recommend for your first time sharing with a friend.
That's really good. And what I like about that is, because a great event always has a great mix of people. And I love how you mentioned you're best friends, but you've each got your own network, and you're able to really bring good, fun mixes of people that really kind of helps elevate the event. It gets it to broader communities, and it also allows people to have a mix of familiar faces and new faces, which is really, the hallmark for a great event.
Yeah, and then just, a sounding board, and then the dividing and conquering piece is really important. Again, as 2 working moms, co-chairing, it's really important that you can kind of split up some of the work.
That's really important, and I'm glad that you brought that up, and really kind of understanding what each of your 2 individual strengths are, so that you're each doing kind of what makes you each strongest, and it really it allows it to kind of butterfly into really a wonderful event. And while we're on that subject, tell us a little bit about what guests can experience at this year's Texas Trailblazer Awards.
Okay. So we don't necessarily have the flow nailed down yet, but we're close. But it's going to be, of course, September 29th at the Anatole. We will have some mixing and mingling when you first walk in. We'll have, I believe we're going to have a seated plated lunch when you sit, so there won't be a lot of staff kind of flowing in and out. But then we'll go right into the program, which will include some opening remarks, the Trailblazer Award recipient to be acknowledged. Then I think we'll have a break, and then we'll have Shelly Slater, and she will come out and introduce Brooke Shields. It will be a conversation with her between Shelly, who is a wonderful, wonderful interviewer, and then with Brooke, and possibly there's potential for a surprise celebrity guest, but we'll have to see how that pans out.
The potential for a special guest star. I love it.
Yes, we'll see though. We'll see. And so it'll really be a conversation versus a keynote, but really hearing Brooke's experiences and her words of wisdom and advice for women and for people just looking to live life to their fullest.
That's fantastic. And you threw in another great efficiency piece when you were talking about the flow of the program. And that is especially for a luncheon when you're forsaken for time, having the lunch already kind of on the table. And that's usually going to be in the form of a salad or something that can be served, cold. It really allows things to flow really efficiently. So that's, I'm really glad that you brought that up. And that really is a way to really help make things more efficient. So, well, we're really excited for you guys. It sounds like this is really going to be a great and banner year for the organization. So, I really, really, really appreciate the time, Lindsay, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Rob. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. And the 2023 Texas Trailblazer Award, benefiting the Family Place and featuring Brooke Shields, will be on October 10th, 2023 at the Hilton Anatole in Dallas, Texas. For more information, please visit familyplace.org. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.